I'm Regan Williams, and I'm a CPA. This is my very first podcast, so I hope you'll bear with me and give me a little grace on my delivery. I tend to talk very fast, but I'm trying to slow that down, so thanks in advance for listening to me. I've been a CPA for over 25 years, and I've worked in a lot of different capacities. I am a part of a small percentage of the population who thinks that accounting is fun. And while I don't think I'm going to be able to persuade many of you to come over to my way of thinking, I can share my enthusiasm and hopefully share some tips and help on how to make the accounting world less stressful. Maybe you're an accidental accountant. You didn't really mean to get into accounting, but you work for a company and you fell into that role. Or maybe you're a business owner and you're doing the accounting in addition to growing your business. Or maybe this is your chosen field, but you feel alone and overwhelmed. However you found yourself as an accountant, I can help you. Last night, I was helping my college daughter with her Accounting 1 class homework, and the anxiety that I felt as she hit submit on the journal entries I had helped her with, it was quite intense. That reminded me that no matter how much experience I might have, when I'm being graded or critiqued, it's really easy to have self-doubts and feel uncertain. The good news is that we got an excellent grade on our homework. Actually her homework, but I was excited to be able to help her, and I wanted to encourage her on her accounting journey and not to make her feel dumb or embarrassed because she was asking for help. And that's what I like to do for my clients. It's one of the most important things I've learned over the years. Giving people that I'm helping a safe space to ask questions, make mistakes, and learn new skills is going to help them feel more confident in their job. So there's 3 common accounting mistakes I see, and they are data entry errors, improper account categorization, and not reconciling your accounts. Fortunately, these are usually easy mistakes to fix. A lot of them can be avoided or mitigated with some simple tips. Data entry errors are easy to make no matter how long you've been an accountant. We all make them, and I don't know about you, but if someone's looking over my shoulder, I am way more likely to make silly data entry errors. It's just a lot of pressure. But sometimes those mistakes slip by us, get recorded, and then they can cause ongoing problems. One time I had a client who was paying their AT&T phone bill, and the amount of the phone bill was $59.95. However, they mistakenly entered the amount as $5,995.00, and they didn't even realize it until it had cleared the bank. They had overpaid their phone bill by 100 months. It was quite a shock to them, and they called me in a panic with no idea what to do and dreading telling their boss. In these situations, my goal is not to only help them fix it, but also to reassure them that everything is going to be okay. It took a few calls to AT&T, but we were able to get the overcharge refunded. But that was just the first step. They had no idea how to fix the issue in their accounting system, and we talked through it, and I lined out the steps that they needed to do to correctly record the mistake, as well as the deposit of the overpayment that was being refunded to them, and then making sure it didn't show up in past and future financial reports incorrectly. My goal was not only to provide the solution, but also to be a partner in the situation so they could move past the emotional aspects and be equipped to avoid a similar mistake in the future. So some ways to minimize data entry mistakes are to use the built-in checks and validations that are available in a lot of accounting softwares. Sometimes you can set a limit on the dollar amount for a transaction, or you can set a date range so you can't record a transaction outside of that date range. Another safeguard is to use templates. If you send out invoices regularly, you can create templates where most of the information stays the same. That way there's just a few data fields that need to be changed. Recurring transactions are a great feature in QuickBooks, and they're the same type of concept, except they're just for journal entries or checks or bills or things you do regularly like that. A second common mistake is improper account categorization. Accounts are like different buckets where you keep track of money that comes in and out, and recording a transaction of the wrong bucket can make it much more difficult to see the true accounting picture. For example, you buy a new computer and you call it office supplies expense instead of computer equipment. You're going to look back and think, wow, I spent a lot on office supplies, but then not see that you spent very much on technology. So you want to take some time to set up a chart of accounts that makes sense for your business. You don't want the accounts to be too broad, but you also don't want them to be too specific. Like some people, they like to set up a separate account for every tiny little expense. Like you don't need an account for paper clips expense. Oftentimes there's a transaction and you just have no idea where to put it. This happens a lot, and I encourage my clients to put it into a miscellaneous expense account. That becomes like a holding account, and later we can look at it together and talk about what happened in that transaction, whether it's likely to reoccur or if it's just a one-time expense. Once we determine that, we can say, here's where we're going to put this expense, and this is how we treat anything similar in the future. So having your accounts categorized correctly helps you in so many ways. It gives you a budget tool, so you can look back and say, this is what I've spent in the past in these categories, and so this is what I'm going to need to plan for going forward. Or you can say, I've spent too much here, so let's cut it back. It also can help you at tax time because some expenses have a better tax deduction than others. And it can take some time to learn the difference between the types of accounts, like the assets and liabilities, income and expense, but this is well spent, and it's really very easy once you get a picture in your head of how it all works together. That's something that I actually enjoy helping people do, is to see how these accounts interrelate and then how that affects your final financial picture. Now, a third mistake that I see quite a bit is not reconciling your bank account. This really needs to be done monthly, as quickly as possible after the end of the month. You might expect your accounting records and the bank's account records to balance and match, but often that isn't the case. There's a lot of reasons why they wouldn't match. You can have an automatic transaction that the bank has recorded, but you don't have that recorded in your accounting software. Or maybe something was recorded for the wrong amount, or there was a timing difference between when something's recorded by the bank versus when you recorded the transaction. And all of this becomes clear during a bank reconciliation. Not reconciling increases the risk of overdrawing your bank account, and I've seen a lot of unnecessary overdraft fees that could have been avoided. Now, at the risk of really sounding like a nerd, I will tell you that reconciling bank accounts are one of my very favorite accounting tasks. It's like a puzzle. Once you have all the pieces in place, you can see the big picture. And when you get to that zero difference balance, it's just really exciting. You might never completely agree with me on this, but I do think the next time you complete your bank reconciliation, you're going to remember it. One time I was helping a client reconcile, and they had deposited a check from a customer for $49,000, but the bank had recorded it as $40,000. So the bank had shorted the client $9,000. That's a lot of money. And so thankfully it didn't cause any overdraft issues. And fortunately, we discovered it quickly and contacted the bank. It took a little time for them to verify everything, but they corrected it and the $9,000 was quickly recovered. However, most banks have a window of time after they issue the bank statement where you can dispute any of the transactions that you disagree with. But if you're outside of that window of time, it can limit the bank's options for correcting the transaction. If we hadn't caught that $9,000 difference soon enough, we would have had to contact the customer and convince them to issue the $9,000 that was shorted by the bank. That would have been a much more difficult solution. In addition to reconciling the bank accounts, you should also take a look monthly at your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, and any tax liability accounts. There's an end of month checklist of accounts to reconcile, and that's a good thing to have so you don't forget anything. These are just a few of the more common accounting mistakes that I see on a regular basis. I know it sounds overwhelming, and each situation comes with its own challenges, but I want to encourage you that anybody can learn and implement good accounting practices, and the benefits are many. There's an emotional aspect of accounting and tax that people don't always talk about. Worry about tax time or the cash flow issues that come along with poor accounting records is a huge problem. So if you start taking the steps today to get peace of mind, you can stop associating your accounting and tax with anxiety and stress. If there's anything I've said today that resonates with you and you'd like to explore ways to have a partner to help you simplify your accounting and tax life, I'd love for you to check out my membership. It's an affordable option to get the answers you need when you need them. I have live calls twice a month where you can ask questions and get solutions, and a growing library of resources. One-on-one access through the Marco Polo app, and a community forum where you connect with other accidental accountants that share your struggles. I would love to hear about your specific issues, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So thank you again for listening, and thanks for being a part of my first podcast.